if we end up in a world where a centralized company owns this resource, or even a government, it could potentially be used for things that I really hope don't happen. For me, everything right now is through the power structures frame. So my question would be, who controls the AI? 80% of stuff is going to be automated, 20% of stuff is still going to have some human in the loop. Right now, you can put something into ChatGPT, you get it back out, and if you want to make money with that, you could. But if it starts making a lot of money, then who's to say that you're still going to have access to it in the same way? I'm very excited for the efforts that are being invested right now in creating open source, decentralized AI. Individual people need to be honored in their freedom. We want to create a harmonious and peaceful global civilization, maybe interplanetary civilization. What does it look like to enter the next era of humanity where we have both?
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. And now, without further ado, let's begin. Today's guest is Nick Naraghi, a passionate advocate for decentralized organizations who is working to shape their development through his company called HATS Protocol. Nick is particularly focused on supporting the transition to a post-scarcity economy where technological advancements and efficient resource allocation could potentially provide an abundance for all. He believes that decentralized structures enabled by blockchain technology and thoughtful mechanism design will play a key role in building a more fair and sustainable future. Enjoy the show. Hey, welcome, Nick. Thank you, brother, for being here.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you in the space. Thank you for agreeing to participate. I still call it an experiment. I'm basically running an experiment and see what comes out of it. I don't really have a particular I'm going to start a podcast and this is going to open this door or that door, or I'm going to start generating more income or whatever that is. I just have this internal calling to do this work, and I'm just running it as let's see what happens. And so thank you for being part of this.
Amazing.
See what happens process.
I trust your intuitive sense making a lot, and I'm very excited to just be kind of in that flow with you, and it's an honor to be here. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So I think a great place to start for the listeners or for whoever is watching to tell us a little bit about your background. Where do you come from? What type of skills have you acquired? What kind of person are you?
Yeah. So my name is Nick Naraghi. Right now I'm working in the Web3 space, specifically on a protocol called HATS Protocol, and it's a way for organizations to give power to their human or AI agents, and we provide some smart contracts and a web app to be able to do that. It's also open source and extensible by open source developers all over the world. I've been working on open source organization tooling now for about 7 or 8 years, 3 or 4 years in this domain, and then before that, I was working on some AI startups in SF. So I'm really been obsessed with artificial intelligence and AGI since I was 17, and I studied computer science and finance. Nice. Used to play lots of video games, and that kind of brought me into the internet originally. And I think, for me, it's not just the technical process and the inventing process, but also leadership and kind of heart-centered leadership that is one of my biggest skills. So.
And where would you say your connection to self, to spirit, in that kind of definition of you? Because I know you also integrated quite a bit in the mindful community here. Is that a new thing, or has it been a common thread throughout?
Yeah, I had a kind of spiritual awakening in April of 2018, and that was a very impactful moment. That was right before I kind of started working on collective intelligence and organizations on my last project. And it's been a journey since that moment where I've been living my life very differently. And entrepreneurship for me now is much more like being in flow and channeling something that's greater than me, and much less machinations of the mind and things that I'm gonna do or calculate.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like it's so important to have both parts of us, the more rational mind and more intuitive, more emotional mind combined, because in order to build a future, you can't lead with either or. Actually, you can't even only lead with just the intuitive mind. You still need, I feel, the way I perceive it, you still need a rational mind if we are operating in this three-dimension reality, right? And then the rational mind, your ego skills, the physical skills are super important here to build a better future, right?
Definitely. It's got to be a balance. I think historically as a society, we've, at least in the last few hundred years, we've been really out of balance.
Right.
And as an individual, I lived a lot of my life out of balance. So I think coming into balance, harmonizing all the different parts in myself and like in our communities, like that's a really important part of the creative process.
How would you describe living out of balance?
How does it feel to be out of balance?
Either how does it feel, or how would you in general define, so someone by hearing it is like, oh, I think maybe I'm out of balance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I was out of balance yesterday, so this is very kind of
present,
tangible.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm starting to close down. I notice more tension. For me, I hold it in my shoulders, my back, just feeling like physical stress. And then I notice my mind will run on the same thoughts more frequently, or sometimes create worries about things that I'm not actually worried about, or I know are going to be okay. And then, it's kind of, I feel less expansive, but I want to try to make that more tangible. Like I feel like I feel the physical energy in my body is moved out of my body, and a sense of embodiment is less there, sense of like my heart is less there, and I'm much more like can feel even like my jaw or my eyes, like a lot more energy moving through my head.
Right. Would you say it's maybe something to do with so it's almost like a processor that runs into a loop and gets stuck, and it keeps running the same program. There's some kind of inefficiency in your operating system that then starting to affect the heart. It starts in your mind, and it's repetitive thinking, and it's probably spiced with irrationality. Those thoughts, maybe those worries are not fully rational. Is that kind of how it is?
Yeah, it's definitely like fear comes in, and anxious feeling or anxiety, and I think that it goes to the mind because it's trying to figure something out when it's really not. It's it's not about figuring something out. It's about like finding a sense of peace.
Do you find yourself most often finding answers to deeper problems? They come, you think, from your mind, or they come from letting the mind rest after the mind worked for quite a while, and then the answer comes through like more intuitive channels?
Yeah. A lot of famous thinkers that I look up to talk about the benefit of going on long walks. So kind of like I think about thinking more as like digestion now. So, okay, I'm going to think about it, or maybe read a bunch of materials or do a bunch of writing, because writing is one of my favorite forms of thinking, and then go on a walk, and I'm digesting all that stuff, and then new kind of insights are created from there. But I would say, especially with this most recent project that I've been working on, and a more kind of spiritual approach to entrepreneurship, a lot of things just kind of come intuitively. Like I find myself feeling a strong pull towards something, and then I find a piece of information that's really important, and then that ends up being the thing that kind of keeps percolating or flows from there. So it's a lot less mental for this time around.
Yeah. I think it's a common modern belief that new knowledge can pretty much only be acquired through digesting some books or podcasts or listening to somebody else. It's an external source. The knowledge comes from external. I believe that the best knowledge comes from within. It comes as a insight, as a download by, yes, you are observing the world and maybe noticing the patterns, and the true new insight and new knowledge is being born from within.
It reminds me of some interesting kind of research theories that are coming out now about the mind as more of an antenna as opposed to the creator of ideas. So we're like tuning into something,
Right.
consciousness or otherwise, that's informing, that's giving us information, and what you just said kind of reminds me of that, and it definitely resonates for me more. Like, okay, it's not coming from me necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm tuning into something and co-creating with that thing.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So we'll dive deeper into those like bigger ethereal philosophical topics. I'd like for you to tell again the listener, someone who's watching. So the project that you're currently working on, I mean, it's all around this concept of DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Give people a little framework of what this is, what type of problem it's solving, why do we need this, and yeah.
Yeah, so something really interesting has been happening in the last, I'd say, 25 years, which is that the internet has made us tremendously powerful. Other exponential technologies as well, but the internet in particular has been a huge driver for the amount of power that individual humans have and that civilization has as a whole. And our traditional structures, like centralized companies with hierarchies, governments, are not able to evolve fast enough to keep up with this exponential power growth. These legacy power structures were kind of created in a time where we had less power. So now that we have so much more power, we have to be able to move faster. We have to be able to kind of dynamically adapt to situations, and we haven't figured out how to do that yet. So what we're really working on is creating digital power structures. So ways of representing power that someone is given in an organization, the relationships that people have that are power, like controlling funds, specific decision-making authority, or access to certain information, or ability to run code. Like, these are things that now we need to evolve into a software-based version of controlling and managing together. And once we do this, we're going to unleash all this amazing potential for more meritocratic, more fair, more exciting to be a part of organizations.
Very cool. So you're saying basically the power, though the requirement is almost the power has to be digitized first in order for what you're building to plug in and start reorganizing it in a way. It's mainly, it starts from pre-internet, there was also power, and you probably wouldn't be able to influence with the tools that you're building that type of power. It's power plus digitalization of it maybe starts this new wave or new era of complexity, how power flows and new entities emerge and more complex relationship starts to emerge, right?
For sure. I mean, we've dealt with power for as long as we've had language, as long as we've had any form of even tribes or, emerging civilization over the years. And I think when you look back to the origin of the United States, like this is a moment where people are coming together and saying, let's evolve the way that we manage power together. We're going to create new structures that are more fair and better for everyone and more free. Like, okay, so on that same thread, like, how do we continue to evolve the ways that we relate with one another to the power that we hold and stewarding our shared power as an incredible global civilization together?
And it's interesting that you, in your description or whatever you were describing, you didn't even mention decentralized autonomous organization for various reasons. Why is that? Just because it's kind of confusing for people? Power is just something that's everyone understands and it's easier to conceptualize. Was that the intention?
There's a few reasons. It's a bit esoteric, right? So getting someone into the technology can be challenging, especially depending on where your come from is. And then DAOs are a very specific way of managing power. So there's I would say one level of abstraction above that, which is the structure of an organization and all of the decisions that are made by this organization, all the different roles that are in that organization. Some of the roles can be held by a DAO. and that's really cool actually. Like cutting edge organ design is groups of people using software based voting structures to manage large amounts of funds, or decentralized protocols that are able to do things that are good, are public goods or public utilities that that a bunch of people want access to, and want to prevent extraction or like rent-seeking behaviors in the middle. So now we can create this whole new power structure that is beneficial for those reasons. But it's not a perfect fit for not every organization needs to be a DAO. Every organization should be run in code instead of in legal documents and in pure social agreements. I think that's happening. Software is eating the world.
Right.
This is one of the pieces of that's kind of been last to that.
Right.
To that kind of it's like the laggard part of the market is this part of it.
Are you saying that even in the future, not all organizations will adopt the DAO principles? Not every organization meant to run in that fashion? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what is it, right? It's decentralized. It's an autonomous organization.
Right.
So I think we're going to have varying degrees of autonomy. So you can have humans in the loop that in certain decisions, or you just have a community of people who are just human beings. They want to share some resources together, but is that autonomous? Maybe, maybe not. And then decentralized, like what, if you have a group of people who are operating in a code-based structure, but they don't need to be decentralized. Maybe centralized decision-making structure in some cases is appropriate. DAO is kind of like one side of the spectrum, or like one corner of a 2x2.
Okay. Give me an example of the type of organization that you foresee to stay in a more centralized form of power. What would that be?
Especially early stage organizations. I think that like when you start a new project, you as an entrepreneur have kind of this vision, this idea, and this energy that's coming through you to create something. While that creative process is starting, it can be centralized. I think it's probably much more efficient and also like honoring of the creative process to stay centralized. And then in some cases, you'll want to decentralize because of the particular category of thing that you're making. If you're making a public utility, if you're making something on behalf of your community and you want to share that, then decentralization or progressive decentralization makes a lot more sense.
So you then mentioned it's more about the maturity of the company than the function that it performs. Would that be accurate or not really?
That's
like one of the pieces of it, yeah?
One of the biggest criteria, I would say.
Yeah, because I would imagine I would love to see the future, man, in which all of the organization and company entities are like run by an intelligent AI that's transparent, that serves humans.
Yeah.
And the only purpose of them to exist is to serve more humans, basically, who are involved in that. And I don't see the reason why all of them could not be run autonomously and in a decentralized fashion. Or am I missing something?
The pattern that we tend to see right now is that there's the top level of the organization is fully decentralized. So you have a group of people, maybe hundreds of people who've come together who have an ownership stake, and they're saying, I have a vote, and I don't want to vote that often, but as long as everything is going well, I don't need to vote. But if anything bad happens or if anything serious comes up, we as a community need to decide, then I want to vote. And then right below that is we call it an autonomous admin, or sometimes you could just think of it as an AI agent that kind of like manages the structure of actually how do we get things done.
Or less important decisions, maybe.
For sure, yeah. 80% of stuff is going to be automated. 20% of stuff is still going to have some human in the loop, but doesn't need to necessarily involve like all of the people who are the co-owners.
Interesting.
And then below that, you have the structure of an additional, kind of more narrowly scoped AI agents, individual humans, groups of humans in teams or pods or guilds or committees or whatever structure, and councils. And then those people kind of get elected or selected by the AI that's picking the right organizational structure. And that's how you like orient like dozens or hundreds of people together in a productive format such that they can accomplish a shared vision and a shared goal.
Right. The ultimate, or like the currency of what you just described, is good decision making, would you say? Like it trickles down on every level. You either allow humans with high skill to do that, or AI to do that, but it's all about making a really good decision so it serves everyone. Is that? Or,
We kind of get into the territory of like skill or expertise. Like, what is it? What does it mean to be?
what does it mean to make a good decision? Or
Well, in some cases, you want to make certain, like, if you can break down the actual organizational structure into what decisions need to be made, I think that's a pretty good way to look at it. The other way to look at it would be like, what responsibilities need to be shared or like handed out to people so that like they can add up to the sum of the goal that's trying to be accomplished by the organization.
do you see a possibility in which AI is able to make any type of decision better than humans?
A lot of cases, I think that, yeah.
Okay.
I think what we see today is that we have like AI agent workers, right? So Cognition Labs just dropped Devin, super interesting software engineering, crushes all the benchmarks, really interesting. Okay, now we know that there's going to be AI agents that are working alongside of us, kind of doing work. And, obviously with things like Midjourney, you see like artists, like the work of artists or designers is also some of that's starting to get automated. That's not as much managerial work, right? That's more like the task specific work.
Yes.
So how do you automate decision making? Well, you start to see prototypes of this in like trading bots and things like that, right? So, okay, we're doing decision making specifically around financial management or treasury management, those types of things. Okay, now you want to bring it into like picking the right person for the right job. Okay, now that's a managerial decision. Okay, you want to take it into, okay, we have a goal. What's the right structure that we need as an organization to accomplish that goal? What's the right resource allocation that we need to accomplish that goal? Yeah, I definitely think that those are going to be increasingly automated.
Yeah, it makes me always kind of there's an unknown. No one can really predict the future, right? It's evolving so quickly. But it's interesting to think about and extrapolate. Okay, so now we have this, let's say, a super intelligent AI that's able to make most of the decisions that a current human mind can make. I'm sure there will be, at that point when we get to that level, maybe there will be another opening of other sets of decisions or other sets of actions that only humans can do. I don't know. But it's interesting to think what would happen if no more decisions of that kind needs to be made by humans, just because there is an agent that can do 100 times better job because it has so much more, metadata around what's happening.
And it creates cost efficiency, right? That's going to operate at a much faster speed, and the cost basis for the agent it's like inference and running compute. That's going to be cents rather than a human being spending hours of time and just hundreds of dollars.
An hour, a really, How do you see that future? What would be left for humans to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. We can take it lots of different directions, and I'm down to explore. One thing that I think I'm an outlier in terms of the people who are studying AI right now, but I still believe that we don't have a generalized intelligence on our hands with pure LLM statistical models. And I worked a lot on symbolic systems and neural symbolic AIs in my previous project, where we were really trying to understand what we called meta learning. So and what is it that a human can do that's so amazing? A baby sees one cat and says cat, right? That's
right.
Wow. And it knows what a cat is because they'll see another cat and say cat.
For sure.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, it doesn't need like thousands of photos of cats to know that this is a cat.
Right.
Right.
And humans are not only able to like do that kind of one-shot learning or few shot learning, we're also able to generalize to learn completely new domains. And what you have with GPT-4 or Claude or these other amazing models is that they've been trained on all of the internet, like
Right.
tons and tons and tons of
Right.
data. Everything we've ever created, in the last 20 years is, in these models. But it's all historical data. So when we go to build something completely new, like how well are these models working on like generalizing to brand new circumstances that are not represented in the training set? Humans have been historically really good at that. I mean, even though like, if you take a human from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and plop them into like this moment, they'll figure out an iPhone, they'll figure out social media.
Right.
Like maybe they're not going to get TikTok or something, but like
Yeah.
they'll get there. How is it that we can expect an AI to generalize to new systems? Well, they just have they either run from historical data, or they have to like run lots of new simulations in the new like domain.
Yep.
And then we would have to kind of create domains or sandboxes for AIs to be able to play, to run simulations,
Yep.
and do the reinforcement learning to like establish good strategies for how to move forward. I'm not sure that we're there yet. There are
course.
people betting hundreds of billions of dollars that this is going to work. So,
Right.
like I said, I'm definitely an outlier here. Yeah.
Your perspective is that AI will never be able to do that?
We haven't figured out the way, and
Right.
I'm not sure that pure statistical models
Yes.
like LLMs are the way. That's kind of what you're betting on in that case is that an LLM in its own training can create the meta layer of learning that allows itself to generalize between domains to net new domains. And I think there's some people who say, of course, it's doing that already. It's amazing. It's already conscious. Like there's a whole bunch of people who think
Right.
a lot of really optimistic things about these systems.
Would you agree, though, that AI is currently able, or appears to be, able to generate novel, maybe relationships between informations maybe humans haven't, right? So it is a new like patterns that's able to pick up on.
Certainly.
Right? Maybe two concepts in the current times finding similarities, polarities. In a similar way, concepts throughout time. It was like, oh, there's this pattern. So maybe extrapolating that further, that's a higher probability that this is the outcome. It's novel, right? There's a novel insight about the relationship of data points.
Definitely.
So you can argue that we're already starting to see signs of AI generating new information that we didn't necessarily input it in training.
Yeah, for sure. So you have, you're running multi-hundred million dimension linear regressions and making new connections between the data points that the human mind just doesn't have the like raw compute to be able to do that in the same way. What might happen, I was just talking to a friend about this actually, is like there are models that are now looking at like that science and are able to draw stronger correlations than like the scientific systems and knowledge that we've created. Yet that system, we can't tell if it has reinvented the principles of science that we already know, or if it's created an entirely different model of the world that is like more predictive of what's going to happen than our models. This is part of the challenge, is that these models are not explainable. They can't like reveal the way that it came to its conclusion. So if you're sitting in math class and your teacher says, show your work, and you just like put the answer, that's kind of where we're at with these models today.
And so what's then your more probable vision of the future, extrapolating as far as you can see, like around AI, around the job replacement and function replacement? What would we be left to do as humans?
Yeah, I'm really grounded technically because of my work with collective intelligence, and also spiritually in a world that where AGI, like generalized intelligence, is not running on a set of servers in Palo Alto and it just like answers all our questions. My model of AGI or ASI is one where we as agents are symbiotically interoperating with AI agents.
We're like nodes.
Exactly. Right. So you have this kind of like global system of nodes. Like first you have the internet, which allows for all the interconnectivity. And then you have the nodes that are existing on that system that are doing this exchange of knowledge and value and work and data in order to kind of co-create route resources to all the right places, co-create valuable work outputs,
Yeah.
and also like continue to innovate.
It's interesting. As you were saying it, I almost saw it as is this new entity, a new body that has arms. Each finger is like a human that's acting on the world. It's like what are they called? Tentacles. The octopus would have what?
Tentacles.
Tentacles. Yeah. Forgive me for my a lack of English sometimes. Like certain words,
Tentacles.
tentacles. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we will be creating other technicals. Wow, that's crazy. It's
all
hard
good.
to say it. With robots, with IoT devices, there will be man-made parts like fingers that are acting on this world, and there will be like a mixed reality in a way, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into the kind of like one of the most fundamental aspects of the way that I see the world, that one of my co-founders now and I like really synced up on, and now is coming into the zeitgeist as AI agents have become more popular. Goes all the way back to cybernetics and Norbert Weiner's work and things like that, where we're talking about perception, sense making, and agency as the core functions of an agent relative to the world. So you have a human, a robot, an AI, a squirrel, or like a company, right? An organization. All of these can be thought of as agents, and each of them has ways of perceiving the world, right? So that for a company that might be like data coming in from the stock market.
Right.
For a human, it's like our eyes and our fingers and our
Right.
nose.
Smell, yeah, all of the senses, right?
Yeah. Squirrel has its own version of that. An AI or a robot will have sensors, right? So you say, okay, how high am I off the ground? Am I
Yeah,
level?
like LiDAR sensor, all kinds of also visual camera, like all the same types of sensors. Maybe even, not maybe, they will definitely be receiving more input than the human is receiving because they'll be able to pick up more frequencies, right?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, maybe a lot more data. Just
Right.
like the LLM runs a lot more data in connections through
Right.
its kind of neural network than we're running. But we have adapted so well through evolution to our environments, right?
Right.
Obviously, our environment has changed a lot because of technology and man-made stuff, but
Yep.
Still we're like really well adapted to like living on Earth.
Right, super optimized. Our brain is like super optimized for efficiency, how to convert the input signal of seeing something for the first time and being able to adapt right away and know what to do with it.
For sure. And
Yeah.
that piece is the sense making piece. So we perceive all these informational inputs from our environment. Some we miss, right? If it's ultraviolet, we're going to miss that. But then what we do actually in our mind, or also like we're talking about embodied sense and in our heart and our gut intuition, we're learning more about the importance of that as our full body of sense making. That's the next thing that the agent does. That's where intelligence lives. That's where like LLM predictions are happening in those agents. Squirrel again has its own version, and a self-driving car or a robot has its own version.
Yep.
So that actually saying, okay, given this data about the world, about my environment, I'm going to go through and try to make predictions about if I were to take certain actions, and knowing that I have a particular goal, like to get somewhere or to get enough nutrients to eat or to accumulate, stock price or whatever, I'm going to try to make these actions happen in a way that I predict will be the most beneficial to my goals.
Right.
And then agency is the piece of actually trying to take the action. So if you imagine like pitching a baseball, you're going to try to like hit a very, looking to try to get a strike, and you're going to throw it a certain way, and maybe you mess it up, or maybe you're really good. You're going to try to like make a left turn, and the self-driving car is making a left turn across an intersection, and the way that it actually does that or fails to do that, that's the agency piece, and that affects the world, and then the world changes, and then there's more perception, and the loop continues.
Interesting. I see agency as something a little bit broader, where you have to be connected to a higher goal or purpose and act in alignment with it. So you're an agent of that cause or something like that. And I don't see a self-driving car as a, I mean, it is considered an agent though, isn't it?
Well, it has goals, right?
Yes.
The goal is like keep the human safe and
Right.
like get it to where it's going, and don't cause trouble on the road, like
Mm.
follow the rules of the road, right?
So it's about just goals or a goal-oriented entity.
Well, the agency part is really taking action, like executing actions. So any of all the possible things that you calculated that you might do based on the perception of the world and based on your goals, the agency component, at least in this framework, is really about what action did you take in the world and how well did you actually accomplish what you were trying to do with your action.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this framework. So you're saying you're co-founder. You said you're a co-founder, or who with someone? So how does that? Tell me.
So my old co-founder and I kind of discovered this framework together in our research process when we were building these neurosymbolic AIs. And then one of my new co-founders was like really excited about a similar mental model, really around decision making and governance of organizations, and these kind of like map directly onto each other. So the kind of insight is that you can look around the world and you can model everything that moves as an agent. And this is what happens inside of an agent. And if you look at like organizations,
What do you mean by that happens inside of the agent?
the perception, the sense making, agency, and affecting the world relative to the agent is a generalizable model that you can use to analyze almost anything in the world.
And what aspect are you guys mostly excited about? Why is that exciting?
Yeah, good question. Well, if we take it back to like creating a collectively intelligent, collectively super intelligent system in the world, and thinking about each agent, us as agents, and other people who are participating in that system as agents, and then fractal kind of groups and groups of groups also, you can think of those as agents. It's just a really helpful way to understand the ways that the world works. And you can make meaningful predictions about how systems, self-organizing systems and systems in the world will operate given this framework.
Right. So this framework is mainly affecting the physical world of atoms and molecules, like something that happens in 3D, would you say? Or that has maybe a component of or like the result is 3D or not necessarily.
I think it works just as well in the world of bits as it does in the world of atoms.
Right. So you can predict like some conceptual thing. It doesn't have to have any part that's 3D manifested, kind of like that.
Well, bits are built on top of the world of atoms as well, so
Right.
we can talk about that. But
I guess, yeah.
A software agent, if you imagine an NPC in a video game, it's operating, roughly speaking, on the same conceptualization. An AI agent, a ChatGPT, is roughly speaking working in the same way.
Right. So it's mainly covering that what is it, right side or left side of the brain that's more logical, and it's not really right. It's the mind part. Everything that happens in the mind space could be influenced by understanding like that.
Well, sense making can be happening from embodiment as well, and I think you can have intuitive sense making that is less explainable because you can't show your work in the same way. But it's also you have agentic sense making in the basis of I feel that I'm hungry, or I feel called to do this work, or I feel like I need to go out of the room right now.
Right.
Those are also just because they're feelings or like coming from the bodily sense doesn't mean that they're not sense making.
Okay, so where can we take it from here? You mentioned earlier some other adjacent topics that you. What else is exciting that you've been wrapping your mind around, adjacent to that, something adjacent to AI maybe. Yeah, I think AI is a bigger topic that we can go around a little bit longer here. So a lot of people are concerned about, AI is taking away this or taking away that,
Beautiful.
right? What would you say to those who are worried about, um, this wave of AI that's a lot more intelligent, that's coming, that's about to enter the space and say, I'm here and I'm capable to do pretty much most of the things you humans can do. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, it's for me, everything right now is through the power structures frame. So my question would be, who controls the AI?
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Let's assume it's a open source, decentralized system that's running on a completely decentralized computational system like that, and everyone participates in owning it, co-owning it, or something like that. So let's say there's no specific
Amazing.
owner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the chances of getting to that world are not it's
Zero.
not. Well, it's not zero.
Right.
I think it's high, but I
Right.
also think there's risk of not getting there.
100%.
There are a
Or
lot
for
of
not getting there.
Well, there are a lot of
Yeah.
people, companies spending lots of money to try to own super intelligent AI.
Right.
And there even some of the news, the OpenAI board news is centered on this problem space. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, who's gonna control what this? Okay, well, what data can go into it? What types of inference it does, the model weights that we choose to publish to people,
Mm-hmm.
the curation and censorship that exists around it. So you can't do this with it, or hey, I'm sorry, I can't help you with XYZ thing.
Right.
And then the value that it creates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, right now you can kind of put something into ChatGPT, you get it back out, and you get that. You can, if you want to make money with that, you could.
Mm-hmm.
But if it starts making a lot of money, then who's to say that you're still going to have access to it in the same way? So all of these layers of what aspect of it is decentralized, and especially have Microsoft's in the equation, right? They're like, well,
Right.
obviously everyone's going to use Microsoft, and obviously everyone's going to want to
Mm-hmm.
use ChatGPT or whatever through Microsoft, and we're going to at least take a cut of the value that's created.
Right.
But if we end up in a world where a centralized company owns this resource, then, or even a government, owns this resource, then it could potentially be used for things that I really hope don't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited for the efforts that are being invested right now in creating open source decentralized AI. But there's this tension between one of my collaborators, Dan, introduced this idea to me. It's like there's a tension between like anarchy, like total open source, anyone can use it for anything.
Right.
And you think about this, any exponential technology, not just AI, but like you could think about nuclear, you could think about different bioengineering techniques that are increasingly available. So this idea of, okay, well, we are free and sovereign beings, and we should be able to do what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what if there's a bad actor? What protections do we have?
Right.
And then all the way on the other side, you have totalitarianism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this just singular control by a government or company of the whole system. It doesn't really respect sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And this tension between these 2 points, what we really need is sufficiently decentralized
Right.
power.
Mm-hmm.
So just enough that
Mm-hmm.
we prevent bad actors from doing the things that we don't want to do,
Mm-hmm.
but also the other side of the tension is really honoring our sovereignty as individuals and sharing these abundant technologies with everyone in the world.
I would say it's not about decentralized way of just enough. It's the other side, just enough to give as much freedom as possible, but just enough to make sure no big damage happens because of bad players or bad actors or something like that.
For sure.
We're trying to make it as decentralized as possible and creating guardrails that are just enough to maintain order of some sort, right?
Yeah.
Is it about order?
Safety,
Safety, yeah.
order. Yeah, to some degree, right? I don't think we can't make like ultimate, order, 'cause that would be, it's a whole, we can go esoteric with that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Uh-huh.
we want to feel, individual people need to be honored in their freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to create a harmonious and peaceful global civilization,
Mm-hmm.
maybe interplanetary civilization. We can have both.
Right.
What does it look like to enter the next era of humanity where we have both?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a good idea to expose kind of like shadow side of us, and not to just put it in the box and say, don't leave. Meaning, it happens on the personal level where somebody might be numbing your pain or your traumas with alcohol or drugs or addictions of different kind. It's still the problem is still there.
Mm-hmm.
You have a way to contain it until your ways of containment don't work anymore, and then it completely explodes and it's a personal catastrophe of some sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's this similar idea with putting too much rules and regulation and like too totalitarian way of containment doesn't allow the thing that we need to work through to start to come out slowly. Like you're just containing it until it just explodes, and those bad actors, once there's a little hole through the system, those bad actors just make a large damage through it, right?
That totally makes sense. I think we see that like as a pretty recurring pattern, and I think looking at the individual organism as an inspiration for understanding how the larger systems work is very sound.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas what's the right path of building that organizational structure that allows as much agency and freedom, but also prevents undesirable events from happening? Yeah.
Yeah, I think shared ownership of the whole organization. So I was speaking a little bit earlier about like the top level.
Yeah.
We call it a governance surface, or you can think of like the whole organization, where someone has ownership and voting ability in that level.
Mm-hmm.
And then also exit rights are super important. So that the idea that you can leave is foundational, right? There's a paper, I forget the author's name, called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. These are basically your three choices as an agent within a larger organization. And voting, right? If you vote in an election or you vote in an organization, a company that you're a shareholder of, whatever it might be, that's one of the things that you can fundamentally do. And then leaving is also another thing that's really important. So protecting, when we say sovereignty, like protecting people's sovereignty on the basis of being able to join and leave these organizations, I think is probably one of the most fundamental aspects of this that creates this type of protection.
Mm-hmm. And then does that apply to any scale of the organizational structure? For example, a government. Would you promote an idea of being able to leave the government easily and go to the next one?
I saw a really amazing post about basically like a futuristic sci-fi world that has an archipelago of different countries or states that you can like kind of leave and join at will. I think it's a really beautiful idea. I think there's a lot of practical challenges in this concept, and especially like navigating from the way the world is today toward that it probably has a lot of difficulties.
Yes.
But the idea, fundamentally, the theoretical idea that I could do some introspection about my values, and then I could go to a place in the world or a community, even if a digital community or a network state that is people who share my values and choose to join. And then if that no longer have that alignment, choose to leave and go find another group of people that I am aligned with. I think it's one of the most beautiful ideas, right? That sense of belonging that comes from fundamental alignment with the people that you're choosing to spend your time and your resources with, and being able to pool resources with those people to accomplish shared goals. fundamentally like one of the most beautiful ideas, and I think will help create a harmonious planet.
Nice. Yeah, I think that way of being is more useful the more decentralized the government becomes. The more like autonomy those smaller communities have, the more useful this being able to leave any community becomes, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's true. It also makes me think about like why, this idea of why do we have centralization at
Mm.
all? Like what was the point of creating a form of central government in the first place?
Control. The more centralization, the more control.
Was
I'd say.
it has a goal that I
Mhm.
think that maybe the goal is a sort of efficiency and fairness, right? So
Mhm.
okay, hey everyone, we're gonna create some balance by creating a central body that helps us create that balance or helps us to manage some of our shared resources, right?
Right.
And also does that in a way that's effective.
Yeah, I think it's probably the main reason is resource accumulation, consolidation, accumulation by those in power, recognizing that the more centralized the organization is, the more resources they will to the top, basically to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how things have evolved, right?
Right.
Yeah, you look at like Citizens United as a major inflection point in the U.S. government, where corporations now have a lot more power in politics than they did
Hmm.
before that, and I think it's interesting, right? Because there's this kind of a famous quote is like absolute power corrupts absolutely, right?
Hmm.
And there's always this forces moving toward centralization. So there's not a lot of forces that are moving toward decentralization. So we have to kind of like intentionally create those. And we also, this is a whole topic that I'd love to talk more about. But basically, I think one of the most interesting things about the moment in history that we live in
Hmm.
is that we can create code, we can create mechanisms in code that are that play out in such a way that move things toward decentralization,
Hmm.
and that might be an interesting and effective counterbalancing force.
Hmm. So the code is an enabler. Try to define the force that's actually moving towards decentralization more. Code is more of like an enabler, I would say, in that process.
Yeah.
What type of forces, maybe ideology or some kind of uh, vision, I don't know, some kind of attractor. I don't. Do you recognize what that could be?
We can create. We can now create. When I say mechanism, what I mean is like a program
Hmm.
that has specific inputs and outputs in the program,
Yeah.
and now is at this stage is able to pipe value through it,
Hmm.
and can create like programmatic incentive basis for certain types of behavior.
Hmm.
So that in its by itself is very powerful, and then we could potentially apply this. If we make the right mechanisms, we write the right programs,
Hmm.
we could potentially apply those to first experimentally, but then more broadly as ways of creating large organizations, network states, things that are of massive scale that support a continuous process of decentralization.
Right. So when I was asking about the software, is as an enabler, the force that's driving the change, or the force that's driving the uh, like us moving more towards decentralization, are people like yourself who are aware of the benefits of them, and I think it's your responsibility and people like yourself to communicate them to I mean, maybe as many people or maybe the right people as much as possible. So we adopt the this model of thinking and this model of self-organizing and trying to like try to use the maybe even the tools that you're building or think about how do we incorporate software-based um, organizational systems in whatever we're doing. Would you say that's
The way that you just framed it kind of says, okay, let's make a movement and try to make this happen. And
mm,
what maybe that's too simple, but
mm,
what I really believe is that this is inevitable,
okay?
that this is happening.
Yes.
We as a civilization, we as humanity are in the process of becoming. We are evolving into our next era. Some people will say that it's evolution in consciousness. we're like entering a new level of consciousness as a species, as a humanity. I really believe that. I feel that, and I see it in people's eyes. So it's very exciting to me.
Nice, man. I think that still leaves the responsibility on people like yourself who are aware of the movement towards it, is to maybe contribute it to it and like help that change to come maybe sooner. Do we even have that ability as humans to speed up the process of evolution, you think?
It's a really good question. I think it goes at its own pace, but like what you opened this whole conversation with, which I really agree with, is like, okay, I feel called to do something, right? So like your individual creative process, my creative process with this entrepreneurship journey is like, it's really, that's how we contribute, and that's going to go at its own pace, but it's also, I think, seems to me that it is accelerating exponentially. So it feels like a very exciting time to be alive.
So the exponential acceleration of information flow could also be seen as a challenge to, a limited mind. It has very wide limits, but there are limits of how much we can process, and it seemed to me that this whole trend is making people potentially more anxious, or we are in the process of learning how to adapt to a completely new scale or level of information flows that we have to navigate. How would one, you seem to be fairly adapted to that change, and maybe talk about your challenges of navigating in that new environment of being very much digitally native, and most of the work that you do is in the digital, and especially in AI and like the cutting edge technology that's even more exponential than other areas of technology.
Yeah, I think our digital environments are now basically infinite relative to what we can consume and take in, perceive in a day, right? So if you go on Twitter, if you go on Instagram, if you go on TikTok, or YouTube or whatever, you will get information endlessly. So now the machine is not going to stop. There was a time where I could have read my whole Facebook feed, right? Those are the days, and it's not like that anymore. And the algorithms have moved from just showing you stuff that from people who you're connected to showing you like a broader zone of things that you might be interested in, because they're still incentivized to get the maximal attention on the platform, not caring for health. So I think, for me, personally, like I try to take an intuitive process to perceiving information. Like when am I called to be on this platform versus not? And also, relating to FOMO, like with events at a conference, but also like with social media, is like, of course, it could always be on there, and there's always going to be value for being on there. But really, just saying, okay, I know that the things that I need to do in my day-to-day are more important right now. When I know that I trust that I'm going to be called to the information that is needed for me in my journey. And how do I explain that in a more like tactical way? I'm not sure. That's really a process of faith, I think.
Do you have your own mindfulness practice, meditation, things like that? And what does that look like?
Yeah. I try to meditate daily if I can. I've been really into Kriya as a meditation practice, and just really relating to the energy in my system through that lineage. I've also been interested in, I journal most days as well. Try to see the sunset every day. That's like one of my kind of core practices. Nice. And then taking care of the body is really around sleeping enough, trying to be consistent times with sleep, regular exercise, really good diet. Those are kind of like my cornerstones.
Your centering practices, the practices that bring you close to the center, and maybe those are the same practices that help you be more like discerning around what information to consume, what's serving you, what's not, just be in alignment with that.
Yeah. And actually what that brings up for me is, finding alignment with my creative process is like the ultimate form of clarity in terms of where I'm putting my attention, because with so much information and sorry. With so much information and also so much potential value, people to meet, connections to make, customers to sell to, opportunities to invest that are interesting.
Right.
It always feels like, okay, well, why wouldn't I kind of be trying to get that value? And really being clear and grounded in like, what is my purpose? Like, what am I creating right now as an intentional, conscious creator, and as like the thing that's like wants to come through me, and that's the most clarifying thing.
Right.
Because if I can filter, okay, this information is cool, exciting, great opportunity, like we're in this, Peter Thiel calls it indefinite optimism. This territory of like, yes, things are going to get better, but I don't know which things are going to get better. So I'm going to keep my options open as much as possible so that when the time is right, I can make the right bet. But because there's so much so much abundance of opportunity and information, we're stuck in this loop of not ever making a bet. So people, like, one symptom of this is people optimize for connections versus like going deep with people, or they optimize for making money, which is the future opportunity to pick a direction and put leverage behind that direction, rather than like going deep into one specific territory or specific bet. And I think that it's really easy to fall in that trap when we're in the information environment that we're in.
You said journaling. What's your journaling practice? What do you journal about? In what way? Is it a digital or analog? What's your...
Yeah, I learned this from a mentor. I have a keyboard that is a Bluetooth keyboard. I connect to my phone. I exclusively use it for journaling. It allows me to express thoughts at the speed that I think them, rather than handwriting, which is also a very powerful way of journaling, but it slows me down and my mind runs really fast, as you can probably tell. And then I try to do a minimum of 10 minutes, but sometimes it goes 20, 30, 40 minutes. And it's really like a check-in with the body. Okay, what parts, like IFS parts work, I think is really great. Or, like parts of myself, or, stuck energies in the body have not had the opportunity to be tended to or expressed.
Yeah.
What emotions are, throughout my, kind of intense day, like what things have I just been holding on to try to like have that check-in moment and clear things and release things. And then just also gratitude, like reflection on, okay, wow, I'm so lucky that I get to do this work. I'm so lucky about the people who I get to collaborate with. I'm working on things I'm really passionate about. So just kind of like the constant reminders there. That's the main thing. Just like getting everything out.
Yeah. At what point do you write down or capture new insights, ideas that you might want to implement or think about more in the future? Is that the same practice, or is it a separate exercise?
I'm totally free form with journaling. So if there's something it's really like just taking kind of stream of consciousness and getting it into unclogging that way. So sometimes there's good insights in there, but I hold myself to 0% accountability on ever reading the stuff that I write, which is very freeing. I have other like notes apps and things that are more centered on like capturing insights, and usually it's project specific. So if I'm working on a pitch, which I've been working on recently, or working on a demo, or working on a way of articulating something, or working on recruiting somebody, or a piece of writing, then usually I have like, I work a lot with paper and ink for those. I work a lot with whiteboards for those.
Nice.
And then kind of, whatever the artifact is, whether that's a document or, a Figma. I work a lot in Figma personally.
Nice.
I think it's really good for that too.
Would you say you type faster than you speak, or about the same, or slower?
A little bit slower.
typing slower?
Yeah, I would say I think the fastest, speak almost as fast as I think, and type almost as fast as I speak.
Right. I've been voice journaling, voice noting a lot more than prior, and I've been developing internal system, creating automations and things that will store it nicely. By nicely, I mean a future recall. I can go back easily and find something. Then I restructuring it. So oftentimes it's also just a stream of consciousness, just unstructured thoughts that don't have a linear thread. They're just like the different thoughts, and then I just capture them. And I'm creating a mind extension, memory and cognition, utilizing AI, utilizing different automation connections to create a repository of my best thoughts, and so I can reference them and I can have them closer to the top of my attention.
Amazing.
By creating, let's say, I go on this longer walks for like an hour, and I would have the entire hour being recorded. Not that I'm talking for the entire hour, but whenever thoughts come through, I would just verbalize them. I don't have to pull my phone and write anything down. I just say it. And then I'd love to create a system where I'm still in the process of doing that, learning as I go, without having technical knowledge of like writing code, just using the tools like May.com and, integrations of like ChatGPT for summarization, Whisper for like transcription, things like that. And then Notion for now for storing the information, and basically creating like, okay, what are the top insights or like quotes? I used to tag the audio content with a particular word, like I would say 22, so I can later search for those and then just find what I identify as like interesting moment in there. But now I'm thinking more generally, probably in the near future, we will all have personal AI agents that know pretty much everything, as much as we want to share. But I would love to have a personal AI agent that knows pretty much everything that I put out, those notes, those ideas that I put out. It's in a private, maybe locally run on my device agent that has access to all of my thoughts. And it could help me make more maybe educated, better decisions in the current moment, like something in front of me. And maybe my mind is not able to take in all of the thoughts that I've thought about before. Maybe I forgot about something, and it can hopefully can remind me and say like, oh, but have you considered you've talked about this or that? And it would be like, oh, that's right,
Yeah, there's sometimes you train up these really good models for playing chess, and I'll relate this back, but the chess model can beat the human, but the human plus the chess model beats the chess model by itself, right? So it's like, how do you create that symbiosis within your own kind of your exo brain, or like your own kind of intelligent systems that work with you in order to like better accomplish the goals.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the agentic model of, you're extending your sense making, right? You have perception of the world, but then like when you do your sense making, it's not just like, oh, okay, I forgot about this thing I thought about a long time ago, or I'm like really hungry today, right? It's like,
exactly.
Like, okay, the AI is helping me make really good decisions.
Yeah, imagine it's like your advisor that knows everything about you. It's super intelligent, and it's by your side. At any given moment, you can it's there. It's looking at the same thing as you are, and you can always ask like, what do you think? What should I do here? Not to take it as the right answer, but as another input for while you're making a decision.
Yeah.
It used to be only like very high status people would have like a set of advisors that they could afford basically. But now we're getting to the point where anyone can have like very intelligent advisor at any given moment to help you make better decisions. You just orient it around what matters to you. That's why Yeah, I'll share a little bit more about this. So, like in my Apple Notes throughout many years, I've consolidated them in one long document, so I can feed it all into
Mm-hmm.
AI, and so I can get a very detailed description of like who I am and what's important. So that almost like. So anytime I need to make a decision, this is the orientation for the AI to know uh, how to orient these decisions around what matters to me.
Yeah.
So that was a very useful, insightful exercise to consolidate, years of notes, hundreds of pages of notes, fitting it into AI and say, okay, to like basically describe. I framed it in the exact same way. I need to create a framework of who I am, what's important to me, those types of things. Give me like a block, like a paragraph about those things, and by just reading it, like, wow, this is so accurate, like this is
Wow.
amazing actually.
It's I like also that you said that you run the model on your device, because this is such an intimate form of connection into your own
Yes.
mind. So I'm really excited about this concept, but then I'm also like think a lot about how do we maintain privacy, data security, right? If you're saying, okay, this thing it lives on my shoulder, I'm gonna use it to make decisions all the time, make decisions about what to do with my work and my attention and maybe romance and my family, and like this is serious, really deep
Yeah,
integration.
for sure.
So how do I make sure that I trust that and that's not beholden to advertisers? Is like
Right.
the probably most benign.
Right,
you
right,
know,
right. Imagine it's like a Facebook AI that's running for you, and
right,
then you're trying to make a decision what to buy, and it's like, oh, of course, that one is the best one.
right.
You should get that one.
Which is kind of what advertising is so far, right? It's like,
Basically, yeah.
you have on the back end of Facebook, if you ever run Facebook ads, you can see like how many impressions people are getting, and like you want to make sure that they see it 30 impressions, and they have to see it in a certain way, and you can tell them a whole story in their feed. Like, yeah, you think that they're not going to try to do that
Of
because
course.
in the AI itself? Well, but that's really, it's already unconsciously influences us in really significant ways. And you see like the possibility space of now running complex campaigns across entire populations of people to get them to think the thing that you want them to think. That's people want to be able to use that power. So I'm extremely serious about the making sure that we are able to do this in sovereignty respecting, privacy respecting ways, and I'm excited, optimistic that we will be able to figure that out.
Same. I'd like to switch gears and talk about the awakening moment that you've mentioned you've had at some point, and then how did that influence the journey after. So tell me about the moment. How did that happen? What led to it? Give me a little bit more background about it.
Yeah, so it was on April 13th of 2018. I had went to a crypto party, actually, quant stamp party. I had been to one a couple months before, had a really amazing kind of synchronistic time, and I was like, all right, I originally wasn't gonna go. I got the invite in the middle of the day, and then I was like, yeah, okay, that's kind of what I need. And there's an amazing series of events that kind of led up to that. My company, my first ever startup, had failed in September of the year before, and I was just like totally lost. I didn't understand. Like I had associated so much identity with the company and like my success, my career, the whole thing with that. And then when it didn't work, I was like spinning and went through like a lot of waves of trying to rediscover myself and suffer, just like the suffering, the grief of that.
Yeah.
And then I found a really amazing community in San Francisco called One Salon. All these people talking about really interesting, technologies and psychotechnologies and spirituality in some ways, and that was great. And then found ecstatic dance, and I did all of it. I was like, this is amazing. I love music, but like I never danced like this before. And then I was doing all this work to find like embodiment, and then all the emotions came out, and that was like months long process, and then kind of led up to this moment in April. And it was very simple. Like I saw this woman there, and I approached her, and we just dropped right into conversation. We ended up talking for like several hours, and her partner was there, and we were just like kind of like chatting with her, chatting with him, and kept having now what I would call like a nonverbal transmission. But at the time, I was just confused. Like she would like pause, and she would like kind of like look at me, and it felt like she was sharing something important with me on a like energetic level, but I didn't understand what was happening. And then and I hadn't maybe I had like like a gin and tonic or something, but I don't think I had taken any psychedelics that night. Um, and I had this moment after like 4 hours of conversation. We
Wow.
got kicked out of the party. They were like, "We're closing the party," and okay. And we're like outside on the stoop, and they're like, "We're going to bed." And I was like, "Okay." And we're like out on the street and continuing this conversation. And all of a sudden, this moment happens where I'm like, "Oh my God. Like, I think I know you from somewhere." Like 4 hours into the conversation, I think I know you from somewhere. Oh, you're me. And I looked at her partner. I said, "Oh, and you're also me." And it was just like my ego dissolved, and I had this moment of like unity consciousness without having taken anything, at least to my knowledge. And it was just like, oh, this is it. Like this is the real thing. Like
Right.
something.
This is the sauce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, the kind of
Wow.
they were like, "Oh, cool, man. That's cool. Like, yeah, that's great." And I don't know if they had that, if they were trying to do that intention or anything, but the next morning I woke up and I could very clearly see the ways that I was out of integrity in my life. So I quit my job. I called my co-founder of my next project and was like, "I'm ready to go. Like, this is the thing." My partner and I broke up. I called both of my parents and was like, I see the ways that I've been distant from our relationship, and I can understand like the responsibility I have in that. I want to be close with you, and I want to build our connection. I called an ex-girlfriend, and I was like, "Oh, I see the way that I hurt you, and I'm sorry." And it's kind of, I think it was probably pretty out of the blue for her, but just so many things that were like left untended to in my life. And as I corrected those or like got them into alignment, my whole life changed. So that's like, basically sometimes I think of myself as like almost 6 years old, because that's like how long it's been since that moment. And my life has been totally different since then.
How would you describe that new trajectory that you set yourself on? What was drastically different? What things have you changed quite a bit?
I think the way that I relate to like what I'm doing is much more in like faith and a trust of that connection to something bigger. The idea of like channeling as my creative process, or like being on the entrepreneurship journey, like doing that as a being of service to spirit or source or however you want to name it, and really coming from that place, as opposed to coming from like the ego mind and like the machinations, right? I gotta do this thing, or I'm worthy if I do this thing, or it's more like, okay, wow, like I get to like have something come through me,
Right.
and that's a really it's a blessing. It feels like a very fulfilling process.
Has that changed your purpose? Like, have you like changed the way you orient yourself around where you're going, or you were still on the similar trajectory, just more clarity?
I think I've been on pretty much the same trajectory. It's interesting to think about like the ways and like the different times in my life, like the way that I held, okay, what am I doing, or what do I want to do?
Right.
When I was like 13, I was like, I want to be an inventor. And then I saw this like, little magazine, they said, of like impressive kids, to inspire you. And it's like, oh, these kids are starting companies. And I was like, I want to start a company. Like, I'm going to start a company by the time I'm 18.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. And then I was in college, I was like, I'm going to be the CEO of an AI company. Like, that's my, and then, that was like the thing. And Of course it's not really about that, but that's, okay, constructing, okay, what could life look like?
Nice.
And now I think about like, I'm super, super blessed to be a leader on the current project that I'm working on, which is really to try to harmonize the way that we orient ourselves to power and creating public infrastructure for that. And I see myself as a channel and as a leader, but one of many leaders, and as a co-creator of like, 3 and 5 and 30 people who are like the concentric circles that are creating, really channeling this thing through. We do a lot of work together to like be in harmony to be able to channel together. I think there's a lot of people who've kind of been on similar journeys who are arriving to this organization that feels really good.
You said you've been doing this work together. What in your organization?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
The developmental work, or like the like day-to-day like product work?
Maybe specific practices that bring you guys closer together, orient you all around the same mission. What have you done around that?
Yeah. So, my experience is really as a startup founder and CEO and leader in that kind of traditional context. And then not the co-founder I was mentioning that we have that kind of similarity on the agent frame. And another co-founder of mine, so there's 3 of us, has literally wrote the book on how to orient a network of people and connect them together and weave the network, and actually accomplish shared goals as a network. So he's been doing an amazing job of bringing 30 industry leaders from across people who are really on the cutting edge of building organizational structures using code, building DAOs, and facilitating governance. Facilitation is like a lot of them, that's their title.
Amazing.
That group of people coming together to co-create in their genius, what does the future actually look like? I feel like we are one of the, if not the place in the world to be where those conversations are emerging. And when we got together, there's a conference in our industry in Denver called ETH Denver, and right before we had a in-person convening, and about 2/3 of people were able to come, and we're doing this deep deliberately developmental process of where we're finding our relationships as human beings. We're understanding the power relationships that exist in our organization. We're having conversations about how we relate to the work and why we're excited about it and why we have alignment with the work. But and also the knots that come up. In a romantic relationship and a co-founder relationship, you're always finding that tension that we have,
Right.
this information.
Yeah.
Okay, and how do we get to unpack that and pull that apart and get to work on that? And we're doing that as a group. It's the first organization that I've ever been a part of that does this level of work this deeply and also with this much success. So I think it's really worth the investment that we're making together.
It's creating a more cohesive structure, right? Basically the way I see it in the relationship with a partner, you come together in a certain shapes, and you're here to create a new unified organism, right? And so the sides of you might not fully align at every part of the surface. You're connecting, but there might be some part of you might be sticking out over here, and it's hurting the other person. So you need to compromise a little bit and become a little bit more soft on this edge over here. And it sounds like a similar process with the group dynamic, where you try to understand maybe everyone's strengths. Give me a little bit more detail of what type of exercise, what do you guys talk about during that process?
Yeah, so it's about in the first season, it was what do you feel called to do, right? Pretty low pressure in the context of our DAO, because we're simultaneously running a startup and a DAO in parallel with the intention to give more responsibility and authority to the DAO over time. But the very, very start was who are you? How did you arrive here? And what do you feel really called to do? And how can your membership in this organization be a conduit for you doing your life's work? and then getting just to go around the room in small groups and then as a big group to hear like what's alive for people, like how they individually connect to the organization's mission. And then when we have to talk about something tricky like compensation, okay, we have some pool of resources, we're going to share it in some way, or like we're not going to share certain aspects of it. Okay, what comes up for you? Like what's alive for you? How are you feeling relative to that? How can we do sense making as a collective around what our individual needs are, what our group needs are, and then how to find the right resources and share them effectively. So you can create technologies that support this, but also like ultimately it's a group of human beings,
Right.
and being able to have those conversations and being in the practice of having those conversations in a way establishes really strong trust, which I think is
Nice.
one of our differentiators as a project.
Amazing. Is there a particular framework? Is that the framework of one of your co-founders that you're following in that process?
So David wrote this book called Impact Networks, and he pulls a lot of it's a playbook for orienting a network, and we have a lot of techniques from there.
Nice.
Spencer, my other co-founder, did a bunch of work as a part of a number of DAOs, and I was in a number of DAOs as well. So we're pulling techniques from that work there,
Nice.
and mechanisms and compensation strategies and things. And then we have another guy, Dan, who's been coaching us and is also a DAO founder, and has done a bunch of his thesis is really around the developmental work is like the most important aspect of what we're doing. If you want to decentralize power, then you have to. It's a more complex thing that you're holding than centralized power. Like, okay, I report to this person, I follow their orders. That is less complex than this new way of doing things. And individually, we have to have an increased capacity to hold that complexity in order for the organization to work. Otherwise, it will fold back in on itself. And Dan really brings the developmental frame, and between Dan and David, like they really have the organization, like facilitation locked in. And then also, there's pieces that other people want to bring from their DAOs, their history, their context that we're definitely inviting, and we're increasingly inviting as well.
Yeah. Are there some resources that you would recommend for an organization that's not necessarily all tech? An example of a video, let's say, production firm that has editors and different types of people participating in content production, something that's related that could help in also orienting the team members and incentive structures. Are there some resources that you would recommend?
It just depends on how deep you want to go. There's a great book called Reinventing Organizations. It talks about like teal organizations and kind of some of the developmental theories. You can see, okay, where are we on the spectrum of the different like styles of management and things like that. I think it's really impactful framework to look at. But my question would be like, okay, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Same thing from decentralization before. It's like, does an organization need to be decentralized? Well, decentralization serves a purpose. Yeah. So like what, developmental process serves a purpose. What purpose are you trying to hit?
Yeah, cohesion, orienting all of the members onto the same goal, same purpose. Basically enabling everyone to do their best possible work and everyone is supporting each other to grow and to win.
I think that probably the first and foremost thing is listening, like the capacity for everyone in the organization to listen and really hear each other, and for everyone to feel heard in the organization. We do a lot of like peer coaching in our DAO, and it's just like, okay, we're going to pair up, and then you're going to have like 10 minutes to speak, and then you'll get reflections. And in conscious community, this is very common, right? This is not anything super novel, but in a professional organization or professional organization, this is much less common. So just bringing some of those insights in, and just blocking and tackling, like really the basic stuff, goes a long way, because you get a different energetic in the org, and that creates it really affects people's motivation, really affects people's like level of alignment and excitement to participate in something that's greater than just the equation of how they make money so they can pay their bills.
If you had this job, there's a big group of people in front of you, and you were given a job to describe a vision of the future that is desirable for you, and hopefully it's desirable for everyone else. to go towards, give people the motivation, the clear vision of what that future might look like, how would you describe that future, that oasis that worth pursuing?
For me personally,
So for if you are here um, to enroll and to enable large groups of people to follow you there.
are you talking about like a general process to articulate that, or for me,
I'm
like what?
interested in, yeah, your
Yeah.
best case scenario future. What would that
Okay.
look like?
Yeah. I had a really clear download, I think in 2018 or 2019,
Mm-hmm.
that my purpose, the reason I incarnated on this earth right now, is to help humanity transition to the post-scarcity economy. That's the motion that's happening, and we have a bunch of supporting technologies that will help with that. Like AI is obviously going to automate a lot of things that help to create more abundance. Bucky Fuller has a great old quote about we already have sufficient resources on the planet for everyone to get their needs met, and we also have the distribution. So now
Mm-hmm.
the next step is to have the right economic models that actually distribute all of the resources to people so that they
Mm-hmm.
can thrive. And I'm a big fan of Maslow's hierarchy, although I know it's a little bit outdated.
Mm-hmm.
That I think we can create. We now have programmable economic systems, and we can create programs that distribute the resources to people such that they get all of their needs met, and they're personally living in post scarcity, and
Mm-hmm.
then they can be in their most abundant creative process and living in an earth that is harmonized and peaceful, where everyone is in their kind of self-actualization and creating their art and creating their whatever their contribution is.
Mm-hmm.
That's the world that I want to live in, and I think it's happening.
Amazing, man. Yeah, I see it too, and that's the world I also um, orienting myself towards and doing my best to maybe speed up the process of the collective getting there as well. You could say, what are the chances of that best case scenario future to happen? I feel like sometimes I get to the realization that it's not even important. Even if it's a 5% chance, um, putting all of your energy into something that you believe in is still better than going the route of like, oh, we're preparing for a World War III, and I have to, instead of dedicating my resources towards building the better future, to like preserving what I currently have. At least that's how I decide to put my energy
Mm-hmm.
into something.
I think it's important to feel safe. That like safety is something that fundamentally expands our creativity. But I also think it's important to intentionally create, like to find love-based motivation as opposed to fear-based motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of forces that in the world, including the news, that will drive us into fear,
For sure.
and it's not useful.
Right.
So I definitely think that, and then also you can think about like probabilistic modeling, and the way that I break it out in my personal practice is what is my dream and what is my thesis. So my dream is like what I just described. This is the world that
Yes.
I want to see, and I'm putting my attention and my intention behind
Mm-hmm.
co-creating that.
Mm-hmm.
And then my thesis is what do I predict is actually going to happen,
Okay.
and trying to take more like mind-based. The agent that's sitting on my shoulder help make predictions type of
Yep.
understanding, because I've tended to be too optimistic in the past, and people feel maybe a little disconnected from sense of reality. So I want to also be informed by what is actually happening in the world today, and what are the specific steps that we can use to accomplish this mission.
Makes
So
sense.
I feel now that I have a first principles build up of how to actually create the world that I described, and the inevitability feels spiritual, like I sense that it's happening, and also feels like I have a mental construction that satisfies my mind of the steps that we could take that would get us there, and the sense that there's a good probability of that happening as well.
What would you say, in your most pessimistic probability, how soon will a future like that, or versions like glimpses of that future glimpses are already happening now in a way, but kind of a full scale, full blown version of it, how long do we have to wait?
One thing that's really amazing about humans is that we are very bad at estimating exponential curves.
Yes.
It does not make sense to the mind.
Right.
So I would say,
Sooner than we think.
Much sooner than we think.
Yeah.
I would say like within 10 to 15 years is probably a pretty reasonable, but it could be much faster than that if AGI is achieved with purely statistical models, and it's also done in a way that doesn't aggregate all the resources to a single company. Then we could be looking at this, and that happens very quickly, like in the next 2 to 3 years. That seems unlikely but possible. Then I would say like maybe before the end of this decade, we start to see major shifts in this direction. But I would say like by the end of next decade, I feel like this is already happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it needs to happen sooner than later. Everyone needs it. Most people are probably not even realizing that they need that type of future. They're just in the weeds, figuring their life out of like scarce resources, and not even thinking about like bigger visions of the future like that.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's not like someone sat down and designed the world to be the way that it is today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complex adaptive system. So we can't just like change it to, okay, we're going to turn this dial and that's going to have this outcome. We have like this whole, it's like a fish tank, you're like, okay, I'm going to add a little bit of algae and hope that helps, right? and observe what happens. So we're really in that same territory now. So, okay, something's happening. We're exponentially, like, people's consciousness or awakening is like elevating and mass scale. Like 10 years ago, talk about meditation, people be like, oh, okay, interesting. And like, last week, one of my mentors showed me a clip from CNBC of them talking about breath work and like how to do breath work, and like that's reaching the masses, and like, so and once again, the internet is we cannot underestimate the power of the internet for being able to advance our understanding of these disciplines, being able to spread knowledge that's been existed for a very long period of time, package it up in a way that people can understand and ingest and use in productive ways. And that is what is the fundamental substrate of accelerating our consciousness. So it's a very, very, very exciting time to be alive.
Amazing. Yeah, man, and I think that's a great place to wrap up the conversation. I'll give you the last maybe few moments to share how people can find you, or any other last thoughts that would be important for you to share. Feel free.
Yeah, I guess as a closing thought, if you've made it this far, thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for hosting. This has been delightful.
Same.
I feel more positive about the world leaving this conversation, and hopeful for the people who will join us on the journey.
Me too.
Generally, I don't use too much social media, but I'm on Twitter, 0xNN2, and I'm on Farcaster, which is a new social media network for my industry. And on there, I'm nintynick.eth. So either way, it's a pretty good way to reach me if you want to reach out.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.